Welcome to the Driving Change podcast on the Evergreen Podcast Network, where we live at the intersection of neuroscience and storytelling. If you love great stories and you love understanding the mindset it takes to be a world-class change agent, then join us as our fascinating guests from all walks of life unpack their unique journeys of perseverance and passion, of expertise and experience, and be inspired to use your own story to drive change. Welcome back to the Driving Change podcast. As always, I'm your host, Jeff Bloomfield. And here we are, our first episode of the sixth season, easy for me to say, coming off the break. This year, the podcast is brought to you by our brand new sponsor, BrainTrust, the neurocommunication company. Many of you know BrainTrust specializes in neuroscience-backed sales training and leadership development programs designed to drive higher close rates, faster sales cycles, increased deal sizes with neuroselling the program, as well as reduced turnover, increased employee engagement, and high-performing culture for your leadership team with the neuro coaching program. The results speak for themselves. Learn more from the folks over there, braintrustgrowth.com. Speaking of transforming organizations, today we have an amazing guest whose track record also speaks for itself. And I think what you're going to learn from our guest today, Paul Epstein, is how you might think about revolutionizing your approach, not just to leadership and personal growth, but how you approach every week, how you approach every decision, and how you approach the purpose in your life. So Paul Epstein is a former high-level executive for multiple NFL and NBA teams and a two-time best-selling author of The Power of Playing Offense and Better Decisions Faster. We would all like to learn how to make more of those. In 22, he was named one of Success Magazine's top thought leaders who get results. Not just top thought leaders who get results. Alongside that year was Tony Robbins, Brene Brown, Gary Vaynerchuk, and Mel Robbins. So this dude's legit. Paul's latest endeavor, Win Monday, is more than just a book. It's a movement. Drawn from 15 years of leadership in his NFL and NBA experiences, his playbook he's going to share a little bit with us today is going to show you how to have more confidence, make better decisions faster, profitable growth, build a championship culture that scales, high trust teams, and unstoppable momentum. So Paul Epstein, welcome to the Driving Change Show. It's an honor to have you on, my friend.
Jeff, I am fired up to be here. And I promise you I will do my best to live up to every single word that you just said.
All right. Well, good, because, we have high bars here.
That's it. Hey, I always say standard of excellence, so no big deal.
No big deal at all. No big deal at all. Assuming that we've agreed on what excellence looks like, then who knows?
Exactly right.
I'm sure we'll get into that as well. The audience is used to learning a little bit about our guest as we start off, and of course you can't escape that. So take us a little bit back, not a little bit back. Take us all the way back to tell us where you come from and who those early influences are, and those values that got instilled at an early age, and then just share a little bit of your journey. And I'll interrupt you with questions as I think of them along the way. We'd like to learn more about you.
Absolutely. So I will start at the beginning for just a hot second, and then I'm almost going to ping pong back and forth, because what you cannot tell by a last name like Epstein is I'm a proud Mexican descent. So my mom was born in Mexico, spent a lot of my childhood in Ensenada. So when you want to talk about roots, when you want to talk about humbling experiences, when you want to talk about you don't need money to be happy, like I learned a lot of these things from just osmosis, just being in an environment where it wasn't what we think of. Look, I'm LA, I'm California, the land of champagne problems. And so it's the exact opposite down there. But a lot of the grit, a lot of the scrappiness, a lot of the figure it out gene came from my early years there. And then fast forward, and then I'm going to go back to the early years. Folks always wonder, they hear a story about, okay, hold on. So you worked 15 years in the NFL and NBA. And did I get this right? You were married on the field of Levi's Stadium? And I say, yeah, not only that, but true story, the venue was my wife's idea, I swear. So that's one thing. But then the second is because of the Mexican roots. So my wife is Mexican on both sides. I'm Mexican on my mom's side. So if you would have been at the wedding, you would have seen a taquero. There was tequila flowing out of barrels. There was even a mariachi band, a first in Levi's Stadium history. So I share all that to say that we're still celebrating the heritage. And then fast forward, I go through my childhood, I go through my teenage years. And it's funny, Jeff, because I always heard from my family, they said, Because look, from one speaker to another, there's a gift to gab, there's a communication piece. And so basically I wouldn't shut up. They're like, dude, this guy keeps talking. So he has one of two options when he grows up. He's either going to be in sales or he's going to be a lawyer. Well, it turns out I built a pretty fantastic career in the world of sales in the pro sports world. And now I'm speaking to sales audiences all over the world. And I married an attorney. So I checked both boxes just in a little bit of a creative way. But I always knew that business was my thing. I knew sales was my thing. So as an undergrad at USC, I'm working in a Fortune 10 company, summer sales internship. Eventually, I'm a recruiting ambassador. And then when I graduated, they offered me a full-time role as a territory sales manager. So here I am. I'm a young buck, 18, 19-year-old driving a sporty Dodge Caravan from retail to wholesale account, managing a territory. And all that I would do on my drives was, as a sports guy through and through, from throwing the ball in the backyard early days with my pops to it just being a massive area of passion for me. Like I freaking love it. Like for me, it was a non-negotiable. True story, Jeff. When I was looking for the one, when I was in my 20s and 30s, wondering like, hey, who's that perfect person? I literally set out a non-negotiable. She's got to be as big of a sports fan as I am, or it ain't going to work. And so like that's how much I cared about it. And so here I am driving from account to account. And for those sports fans that are listening, it might not be everybody, but if the name Mel Kiper rings a bell, because I'm listening to ESPN radio, he comes on one of the first commercials. And Mel is an NFL draft guru, starts to study high school football players and basically tell you where he thinks they're going to get drafted. And Mel talks like this, like high energy, high octane. And he comes on ESPN radio and he says, have you ever dreamed of working in sports? Have you ever dreamed of working for your favorite MLB, NFL? And I'm just speeding down the highway like, yes, yes, yes. Call 1-800-SMWW now. Well, SMWW stands for Sports Management Worldwide. I made the call. I took their 8-week online course, impressed the instructors. They said, where do you want to be? I said LA. They said, great. We know some folks over at the Staples Center. And this is a couple decades back when Kobe and Shaq are busy winning championships with the Lakers. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm a proud born and raised LA kid. I could work for the Lake Show. This is amazing. And they made the call, and I end up working for the Clippers. The other team, of course, right? That's how life works out. So I'm working for what was known as the redheaded stepchild of the building. I'm an entry-level sales guy. A year before I start, ESPN called us the worst brand in sports. And then my second week on the job, the front cover of Sports Illustrated said, worst franchise in sports history, with 3 Clipper fans with paper bags over their head. And they had marker written on the forehead of these bags. And one of them said, just shoot me. And I had to sell that. So, Jeff, that's how my career in sports started.
But the bar was so low, though. Come on, Paul.
No, but you know what was so cool? And even to this day, I've never worked for the market leader. I never worked for the favorite. I was always in this underdog environment. And look, when I started for the Clippers, I think there were about 8 or 9 folks. We started the same day. Nobody else made it to the 3rd month on the job. That was the environment. And look, I was making 6 figures at high potential with a Fortune 10 company. I left those 6 figures to make $7 an hour.
I was going to see if there was a punchline to that.
Yeah.
And you gave up the Dodge Caravan in the process.
Gave up the Dodge Caravan. Yeah. If you were to say, hey, this guy's eventually going to write a book called Better Decisions Faster, he's known to leave 6 figures for $7. How's that for an intro, right? But look, I can tell you all about it, and we can double click on the rest of the 15 years, but that's how I cut my teeth, and that's where I got started.
So do you think, Paul, that there's a piece of you, maybe it stems from your mom, maybe it's from your dad, your upbringing, there's a piece of you that's just always just hungered as the underdog. Like you see it, you don't mind being it, you're attracted to it. You like that story because, a lot of Americans, especially sports folks, we like the underdog story, but there's a difference between liking to root for the underdog and not mind being the underdog. Like, where do you think that comes from?
Great question. I'm going to answer in 2 ways. So for one, I think, yes, being the underdog is awesome. I also think that for me personally, I will say this, I would never have had the career that I had if I didn't start where I started. From LA to New Orleans to Sacramento, there was always this underdog piece. New Orleans, we almost lost the team to permanent relocation. Sacramento, even though I was head of sales, HR takes me under their wing. They say, we want you to head up our company culture initiatives. And then a month later, league-wide labor lockout. So how do you manage morale when it feels like people's livelihoods are taken away? Those were the storms that I went through. And I'll tell you what, I was on a fast track because of it. Because if you can be one of the few that survive, and not only survive, but thrive in those environments, do you know how hireable you are? Do you know how fast you can accelerate your growth trajectory? You know, when I was in San Francisco eventually, so my story was 3 NBA teams, NFL league office, and then the 49ers. And I was at the Niners in this interesting gap where before I got there, they were winning games. After I left, they were winning games. So maybe I was the black cat. I don't know. But when I was there, when I was there, the Golden State Warriors were crushing it, right? It was during their whole dynasty era. And I had friends that worked at the Warriors, and as we're having adult beverages and just, chopping it up, I would kind of talk trash on them. I'm like, oh, you're so awesome. You generated $5 million last year. You picked up an inbound call. You're cool, right? Like, so for me, I always wanted folks to know, dude, we earned this. Like, we earned this. Like, nothing was ever given to me. So I never had to explain, or the context never mattered. They said, wait, hold on. You and your teams generated that much in that environment? Yes. And so no explanation is needed versus if you work, like if you're the top sales guy for Coke in the beverage industry, I don't really know what that means. You have 70% market share. I don't know. Should that impress me? Should it not? I would need to dig deeper, but I need to question something. When you tell me that you're the cola company, that it literally says cola on the can, I know that if you're generating a certain amount of revenue or you're leading a certain type of revenue transformation, that you had to earn every single bit of it.
Yeah, for sure. So what do you think it was then as you went through that journey, now that you reflect back on it, because you speak about this, you coach others on it, you teach on it. The mindset that was required that you had that got you to get up every day and do that, to do the things, the hard things, keep hitting the nail. Was it a mindset that you feel like you always had, or was it something that you had to develop to be more intentional about it?
I was raised with it, but until the worst day of my life, I'm not sure that I would have followed through with all of the actions and the results that I just told you about. So when I was 19 years old, I lost my hero, my dad. I'm a freshman. I get the phone call that nobody wants to get. I'm an only child. And so all of a sudden my mom goes from parent to partner. She goes from mom to best friend. And I'm 19 years old, just trying to figure life out. And you grow up instantly. And what this taught me, of course, life can be a short show. So you got to max out. Like literally, Jeff, if today is it, if tomorrow is it, if next week, I will be at peace. I hope that I live the next 70, 80 years. And I hope, and obviously that's everybody's hope. But I know factually that that's not always the case. And I'm not going to die with regret. So I learned that at a very, very early age. So when you talk about purpose, when you talk about doing it for a reason that's bigger, it was never the sales scoreboard that got me out of bed. It was making my hero proud. I learned about purpose and why and values and impact. And I'll share a quick story on how this all comes together. My dad by trade was a continuation high school teacher. If you're listening in or you're watching and you don't know what a continuation school is, it's a kid's last chance. They've been kicked out of traditional school time and time again. They land at a continuation and there's no next stop. And so the hope and prayer is that they don't go on to become a statistic on the street. And my dad chose that environment after teaching in traditional school for decades because he felt he could have a greater impact in that environment. And a few years after he passes, at this time, I had already got the promotion to be sales manager at the Clippers. So I'm walking in the streets, neighborhood, around the school that he taught at, and a couple of his former students recognized me, and they came up to me. One of them said, "Your dad was the first person that ever believed in me." And the other said, "Your dad gave me a reason to think that tomorrow is worth it."
Wow.
And Jeff, until that moment, I didn't know that there's people around us every single day that don't feel that tomorrow is worth it. And so when you hear that and you feel that and you're looking into this person's eyes, like they literally felt like angels delivering a message to me, man. And I'm in my 20s. Like, so when you want to talk about accelerating your maturity, accelerating your emotional intelligence, accelerating your knowledge of what really matters in life, like I said, I want to do that. Yeah, my dad chose a classroom. I chose a boardroom, and now I choose a stage, but the impact is all the same. So ever since I made my measurement of success, if I made my hero proud, then it was a great day. Paul, was it a great speech? If I made my hero proud, then hell yes, right? Like I don't overcomplicate things. I just say, if I made my hero proud today, then it was a great day. And I've been living with that undercurrent that drives the way I show up for decades now. And it's made me who I am in this conversation.
That's amazing. Oh man, I love those stories like that. And I wish everyone had that example, not the way you had to get it, obviously.
Of course.
But what you're talking about there is so motivational to anyone listening. That idea that you wake up every day and somebody in your life needs to hear they're valued and that tomorrow matters and that tomorrow's possible and tomorrow's worth it, to your point. And if we all took that as, hey, it's my job to go out and find those people and make sure I speak that life into them, whether you're a postman, a ditch digger, a principal of a school, an NBA player, or a professional keynote speaker, it doesn't matter, right? Your venue changes, but your mission doesn't.
Absolutely right. I think every single person in this world, I mean, we've all heard stories or we've all read stories about something as simple as eye contact with a stranger so that they feel seen. Like, this doesn't have to be a magical thing. You don't need to have a microphone in your hand. You don't need a professional sports background like I have. Absolutely not. I actually think it might be even more powerful when folks that are just navigating through their day-to-day, all this is, and I love me a good sports metaphor because I get brought in, and I'm sure you do too, Jeff, and everybody wants these business outcomes, and everybody talks about bottom line, and everybody talks about ROI, and there's performance, and there's productivity, and there's revenue, all the stuff. And I get that, and I love that, and I believe in that, and my resume hopefully can prove that. But I just call that playing big. When people play big, then they show up bigger, and that's when they perform and produce, and they're more engaged, and they care more, and they're more connected, and all the things we want them to do. But my piece is, in order for people to play big, they need to feel big. When people feel big, they play big. So I don't focus on the playing big part. I focus on making people feel big, because if you have the right people in your locker room, if you're touching the right people every day, if you have an open mind and an open heart, just make people around you feel big. And if you can do that, they will take care of the rest. But here we are, especially in business, and we're trying to wave a wand so people play bigger. I'm like, dude, they don't feel big. So you can get short-term results. You can dangle a carrot. You can hit with a stick. You can give a paycheck. That's going to give you short-term playing big, but they will never permanently play big unless they feel big.
Isn't it interesting? And you've seen this, because I'm a big sports nut myself, and I've loved it since I was old enough to walk. All of it. I'm a Buckeye, by the way. I saw something in your profile.
Oh, you got a game. Yeah, I know. Don't worry. Hey, we're still friends. I'll tell you why. Because my executive MBA was Michigan, so that's why we should hate each other. But you know this. If you ever gone to a post-grad program, your heart usually, not always, but usually is with your undergrad. So fight on, Trojans. I say go blue, but we can still talk. We're good.
We can. No, but you've been around enough programs to know. I'm curious, as you made your journey through that from the NBA and the NFL, ultimately to the 49ers, were there a couple of people that you came across, whether they were executives or coaches or GMs or whatever, where you just looked at them and immediately you knew they had it? They had the ability to make people feel that way, and you could see it in the way that it rippled out through the results of their teams.
Yeah, so fun analogy, and then we'll get back to business. I always say, when you talk about dating or you talk about relationships, sometimes you got to date some crazy to find the one. And I feel the same about our early to mid journey in a career. I learned a lot more of what not to do early in my career from the folks around me than what to do. And so I'm not going to name names. I'm not going to name organizations. People can look at my LinkedIn profile and connect the dots. But Lo, I'll just say this. I wasn't born and raised in positive work environments. I wasn't born and raised with positive cultures. Hell no. I was raised in the opposite. And so sure, there's still a little bit of scar tissue there. But at the end of the day, I realized this is not how I want to be treated. So whenever I'm in that seat, I'm not going to treat people this way. And that was a lot of years that I kind of navigated that learning of, I'm not going to do it that way. I'm not going to do it that way. I'm not. But maybe in an org chart, I didn't have a choice at the time. And so, and now, look, I would critique my line of thinking back then and say, you always have a choice and you can't. But I was young and I didn't have that perspective. I just thought you had to say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. And I wanted to grow. And so I played the game and I drank the Kool-Aid and it was what it was. And I don't apologize for that. I just hadn't figured it out, all the nuance of how to grow and reach your potential and all that good stuff. And so to answer your question, when I was in business, the first time that I ever was a part of a culture where I felt cared for and I felt like I mattered, I felt like my opinion mattered, I felt like I could share ideas that could positively influence the environment that I was asked to be in. When I was around leaders that didn't talk, they just role modeled, they were just action driven. And I just realized, you know what? I don't even care what comes out of their mouth. I just want to be like them. Like the way they walk, the way they navigate, the way they handle problems, the way they treat me when I screw up, the way they celebrate with me when I do something awesome. Like that's my person. And so I learned a lot more. So because of what I went through a lot of bad dates, and then eventually I found these leaders and this culture and this organization where I was like, oh, this is different. And so, and I'll be very open. It was the 49ers. Yeah. It was the 49ers. So I went through the majority of my career with a very mixed bag of cultures, a very mixed bag of leaders, a very mixed bag of environments. And the Niners, I was like, dude, this is the holy grail. Like it's almost like you feel like it's not real initially because, this is the honeymoon period. Eventually it's going to expire. Eventually it's going to wear off. And then it doesn't. And you're like, holy smokes. This is how it's supposed to be. So a lot of the insights, even my keynote, sure, I tell some stories about adversity and storms from my earliest chapters because that stuff is real and true. But I'll tell you what, I mean, Jeff, this is pretty crazy. I was at the Niners in one of the bigger, more controversial experiences that the industry and the world had ever seen when Colin Kaepernick kneels. And I'm not going to share anything political or social. That's not my place. But I was there and I felt what it was like to be in the midst of a controversy and a storm and this adversity. And how do people show up the next morning? And how do we navigate through this together? And does this divide us? Does this unify us? Like, what does this do? Regardless of your opinion about what he did, I saw what our owner did the next morning. I was in the boardroom. We're returning the phone calls and the texts and the emails 48 hours later. Like, I was there. And so it's the classic thing of, you can measure somebody by the blue sky, but I think the reality is it's the adversity. So I always say adversity does not build character. Adversity reveals character.
Right.
And so that's how I have just tried to model myself for who you are during the storm is who you are. That's it.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. So when you were there, I'm curious because I saw that at one point you were the San Francisco 49ers Y coach. Tell us a little bit more about that role. What was that all about?
Let's go. So handful of months after the epic wedding. So wedding was March of
You said a mariachi band, not a Steve Mariucci band, right?
Good call out. Yes, a mariachi band. Exactly right. And for those on video, you could see I have a piñata over my shoulder. So needless to say, there's a whole backstory to that too. I call it the piñata principle, but we can punt on that for now. So handful of months after the wedding, it was the fall of 2016. I went to a retreat that changed my entire life. It was the most transformational experience, even to this day, that I've ever been through. So C-suite of the Niners, president and all of his reports, of which I was one of them, we went offsite for 2 days to find our why, find our values, and I literally felt like a different person immediately. I had never done that inner work I heard about things like why and purpose and values, but I just thought that was for companies. I just thought that was the macro. I never knew it was the micro, the inner stuff. And so thank goodness that I was brought into that environment. And the reason it was so impactful was it reconnected me to my dad.
Oh, wow. I was gonna, you're right where I was going to ask was, is that where you okay.
Yeah, yeah. When I identified my 5 core values and impact is one of them, and they said rank them, it wasn't even a conversation. It's like, dude, impact, my dad, my hero. I want to make a difference. I want to leave people in places better than but I never could have articulated that.
Right.
Never. I was just blocking and tackling and grinding and hustling and winning and succeeding and goals and achievement and alpha and high performer, all this stuff. My LinkedIn profile looks amazing. And I thought that's winning. And then the interesting part, Jeff, and I know you know this space really well, but sometimes when you do that inner work, before you have all this positive reflection, and now I'm like, oh, it was so great, and I love the retreat, and I'm so happy I was there. Well, there's a middle ground, which is there's a massive amount of tension after you figure out who you are if you are not happy with how you've been showing up. So I came from that retreat and I instantly realized I've got a work Paul and a personal Paul, and there's a gap. So do I want to keep showing up? And especially with authenticity being a core value, that is beyond not authentic. So I'm violating my values.
At that point, right?
Yeah, man, it's like tension and this nasty rubber band. And it's like, but what do I want to do? Do I need to still show up that way in order to win? And so it forces us into a rabbit hole. But to get to the why coach piece, here's what happens. And the origin story of Winning Monday, when I say from stage that there is a single Monday that can change your life. For me, it was the Monday after this retreat when I get back in the front office and I'm preaching from my imaginary soapbox to my team all about the retreat. Oh, and I found my why. And then one by one, they started to come up to me and said, I want to know my why. I want to know my why. So now some water cooler buzz starts internally. And now eventually some of the football coaches approach me. Then eventually some of the players approach me. And then eventually HR approaches me and says, what do you think of coaching the why to our onboarding employees? And that's how I became known as the why coach.
Why coach?
And it was a passion project. It was a side hustle. I'm still running sales. I'm still doing my day job, but I'm showing up at 6 a.m. to pour myself into people. I'm taking time on weekends. I'm hanging out after work, like all from my heart. I just wanted to pay the gift of purpose forward because I said, if this was my purpose, the way that retreat changed me, I just want other people to have the opportunity to figure out who they are at their core. So now they can be more intentional with how they make decisions and how they take actions. Because that's really, I think life and business are a game of decisions and actions, but I didn't have clarity I didn't have a method to my madness on my decisions and actions until I did the inner work.
Isn't it so true as humans? I mean, we study this right from a neuroscience standpoint, but this idea of emotional contagion, like we're not actually vessels, we're conduits. And so if your emotion coming in is dark and black and not helpful and not giving, that's still coming out of you. It's just not like people don't like to receive it. But when you do that inner work and you find the why and you get that purpose and you start to recognize you have something of value to add to others, that also flows through you and out of you, right, into others. And I think that's what you've been working on since you left the industry, quote unquote industry, into starting your own. Motivational is not even a good word for it. I think your inspirational, impact-driven purpose you have for your life today was all born from all of those stories, like all those little mini stories from the Clippers all the way through the Niners and beyond. Now has culminated in this person who doesn't look anything like the person who did on this, when they were young. Yet everything about the values of who you were and when they were instilled in you are now being magnified through that experience, that journey, right?
It's a through line, and literally in 15 seconds, I can explain. When I'm at the retreat, they do a lifeline exercise. And so if you were to think of a blank piece of paper, you draw a line from left to right down the middle, and on the left side is birth, and on the right side is present day. Above the line are peaks, below the line are valleys, and you put like the biggest peaks, lowest valleys. And so, hey, for me, lowest valley, losing my dad, right? Biggest peak, meeting the one, having my first kid, all this stuff, right? And so you go through that, and there's always a through line. Always. And that's why there's a partner and they're listening and there's themes and those themes become your core values. And you say, oh my gosh. So Paul is a person of impact, of growth, of belief, of authenticity, and of courage. And I can trace where the origin story is for each of those values based on my lifeline. Why did I become an entrepreneur? Why do I burn the boat? Courage. So all my big decisions and all my actions, even to the micro actions that are very vanilla in my day-to-day, I try to intentionally source them from my values. And that's when I feel at my strongest.
You just summarized our entire business and our entire philosophy all in 15 seconds, Paul. So we can probably drop the mic. We could collectively drop our 2 mics here, and you could go get on an airplane somewhere and go speak somewhere else.
I love it.
So when you then you got into, because we're both authors as well, and I love that process. You wrote The Power of Playing Offense and Better Decisions Faster, pretty close together, if I'm not mistaken, not too far apart. What was that process like? And then tell us a little bit about why you wrote those 2 books and what you were trying to offer and give the world with them.
For sure. So as amazing as the journey has sounded to this point, let me just caution everybody watching and listening to say that I do not have a crystal ball, and you should not just blindly take my future advice, because if I had a crystal ball, you do not burn the boats to go all in on speaking in January of 2020. But that is exactly what I did. Now, look, I was speaking as a part of the day job for a decade and a half, but I would have never called myself a keynote speaker. I was just delivering keynote speeches as a part of my job. And now burn the boats and as a thought leader, and I'm all in. So it was a pretty awesome 2.5 months. And then March of 2020. And so, you dust yourself off, and I feel like I'm a pretty resilient dude. So by the end of March, I figure out I got to do something, because there ain't no events, there ain't no stages. So what do I do? And that's when I decided to write my first book, which I probably would have done a year or 2 later in the natural course of life. But this accelerated it because the calendar all of a sudden was free. And so I literally wrote it in 90 days, which an interesting story there is, my second book, I actually knew what I was doing, and it took me a year and a half. And my first book, I didn't know what I was doing, and it took me 90 days. But here was the reason I wrote the first. The Power of Playing Offense, the subtitle is A Leader's Playbook for Personal and Team Transformation. Jeff, that was the leadership playbook that I needed and I never had. When I was a sales manager, when I was a director, when I was a VP, going through this trial and error and figuring it out. And yeah, there's a happy ending to the story, but it probably wasn't the most efficient route. I hurt some people along the way because of poor management behaviors. I had to go through it. And I said, there's probably a better way. Dude, is that person still going to screw up? Of course. Is that person still going to have learning lessons? Of course. But what if I could prevent some of the more dangerous ones? And what if I could accelerate the good ones? And so I wrote the playbook that I never had. And it started with leadership of self, and then into leading others, and then into leading the future. And then the outgrowth of that, a couple years later, because in conversations like this, so Paul, what do people, teams, and organizations that play offense do differently than those that play defense? And I could have answered it in 20 to 30 ways, but my team and I wouldn't be satisfied with that. So we said, no, let's go back to our consulting notes, our training notes, our coaching notes. Let's transcribe our podcast. Let's identify if we can find a silver bullet of what is the biggest difference between offense versus defense. And we found it. And the biggest separator is decisiveness. So I wrote Better Decisions Faster, because the most important decision we can make is to make a decision. And if we make a decision, then it leads to action. And so if decisions lead to actions, let's not just make decisions, let's make them better and faster. And I study this space of decision-making, and I said, well, look, I've suffered from paralysis. I've suffered from indecision. Surely it's not just me. Well, it turns out the research says 85% of people suffer from indecision, and decisiveness is the #1 correlation to quality of life. In other words, there is show me the quality of your decisions, I'll show you the quality of your life. Good, consistent decisions leads to good quality of life, and then the opposite's true. And so what I really wanted to do, though, was find a framework that people could apply instantly. Because some people are logical, some people are more emotional, Some people are more intuitive and gut, but I never heard a consistent way to make decisions. It seemed very random, and that didn't seem right to me. So I said, what if I could audit my decisions regardless of outcome? Put the good outcomes over here, put the bad outcomes over here, but still, let me do that. And then let me source it from my clients. Let me source it from, and I just went deep in the research rabbit hole. And I started to understand that there were 3 checkpoints: head, heart, and hands. So in your space, you do a lot of mindset work. Of course, head is mindset. Heart is authenticity. So that's the no BS zone. That's the truth. And then hands are action. So I would ask everybody listening and watching right now to say, think of a decision that you're currently stuck with. Maybe you're challenged. Maybe you don't know what to do next. And as you think of that decision, the equation is head plus heart equals hands. In other words, when deciding whether to use your hands, whether to take action, there's 2 checkpoints. Head, do I think it's a good idea? Heart, do I feel it's a good idea? And just like when we're driving a car, you pull up to an intersection, you know exactly what to do. Green is go, red is stop, yellow is assess. That's how the equation works. So think of that decision again. If you're listening and watching, think of your decision that you're stuck with. If your head and heart are both on board, green light, 10 out of 10 times you take that action. The opposite, no head, no heart, red light. Don't do it or stop doing it. And then when either your head or your heart is on board, that's the messy middle of yellow. So Jeff, I wrote the book to inspire more green lights. I wrote the book because the head, heart, hands equation is preventing people from running reds. And I wrote the book, and you're going to have to read the book. A podcast cannot do it justice because the messy middle of yellow deserves much more than a single conversation. I wrote the book to conquer and navigate the messy middle of yellow because if we can identify the yellows that have the opportunity to become greens, then that's how transformation happens, but it starts one decision at a time. So that's the quick pitch on Better Decisions Faster.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So if you haven't already had a chance to do so, if you're listening, go out and grab that. So I think, we teach a lot of concepts around, the behavioral psychology and science behind decision making. But what you're doing there that we're big proponents of is you have to simplify things, put them into a framework that is adoptable and adaptable, and then people can get it. Otherwise, I can nerd out on people forever and talk about all kinds of neurochemistry impact of blah, 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 but it's people's eyes glaze over and then they're indecisive, right? So
exactly right.
To accelerate it, you got to simplify it. And you've done a great job of that with that book. So then how far from that point forward did it take you to come up with the idea of what Win Monday was going to become? Or had it always started to evolve from the beginning? I'm curious to the birth of that and where it's at and then where it's going.
Yeah. So while the Monday after the retreat, I can now trace that to an origin story, but I wasn't saying the words Win Monday the next day, the next month, the next year. It frankly, being very transparent, playing offense and Better Decisions Faster were one of those build it and hope that the market will come. So write the book, the speeches follow, and you have high confidence that A will lead to B will lead to C. And in both cases, they did. I actually didn't come up with Win Monday on my own. What I started to do was I started to incorporate it at the end of my speeches as a call to action. Here's one way that we can win Monday. So I was saying the words baked into my playing offense thought leadership and my Better Decisions Faster keynotes. And at the evening reception, after I talk, I always put my student hat on. I'm a learner. And I say, what's the number one thing you're going to take away? What's the number one thing that you're going to take action on? And Jeff, I swear to you, as soon as I started to say Win Monday, playing offense and Better Decisions Faster took an instant backseat. Everybody at the reception said, I'm ready to win Monday. I'm ready to win Monday. And you hear it 5 times, it's a coincidence. 10 times, that's interesting. 50 times, this is really interesting. 100 times, I can no longer ignore it. 1,000 times, okay, Paul, we've got something. We've got something. So then the podcast becomes Win Monday, then the shirts and the gear and all that, and then the speeches. And not only has it led to massive practice growth, like I'm coming off back to back 2x years, and I really do credit the battle cry of Win Monday because people feel like I can do that. You're not telling me to have a winning life. That's too distant. You're not telling me to win the year. That feels like I need to do 10,000 things. You're telling me to win Monday. And this is a stacking principle. This is a compounding effect. If you were to win every single Monday, meaning you took one action each Monday with intention to say, I'm going to win the day, building a new relationship, having the challenging conversation you've been putting off. If you're going through a health transformation, put your shoes next to the bed. Whatever it is, you just choose one thing that you can do to take action on and win Monday. And now you're going to have momentum to win the week. And then you do it again the following Monday. It could be the same action. It could be a new action, and you have momentum. And over time, it becomes unstoppable. And the compounding effect is winning weeks lead to winning months, leads to your most winning year yet. But all you had to do was make a single decision and commitment at the very beginning to win Monday. And that's why it's blown up, Jeff, because people feel like I can do that. It's not just motivating, it's accessible. There is not one person in the world that cannot take one action every Monday to better themselves. And that's the spirit of Winning Monday.
And it falls right in the line, with the neuroscience of habit formation. Is that it's incremental, tiny habits, right? It's the same. It's that incremental stuff I believe I can do, that I know that I can do, and that I know how to do, and I don't feel overwhelmed by.
And you have confidence because now you prove it to yourself. I can do it.
Yep,
like
that's right.
The first time's a little funky, second time's a little funky, and then by the third, fourth time, as you know, habit formation, 3 to 4 weeks. So you do this for over a month. You're like, man, I'm rolling.
Yeah, that's great. All right. Well, I'm an ideator with you, so I'm going to celebrate together. We're going to launch right now the sequel to your Win Monday, brought to you by Paul Epstein and Jeff Bloomfield, called Celebrate Friday. You win enough Mondays, you start celebrating Fridays, it's going to set you up for the next Monday. Well, look what we've done here. I mean, we were just circling this thing. This is awesome.
I love it.
Go with a good tagline, and we'll just keep going. And we'll start doing dual keynotes together. It'll be amazing. No, it's great. This is such a powerful. People listening might think, well, this is Jeff, Paul. This is so simple. Yeah, that's the point. Is taking really hard things and making them really simple, make them very accessible and very actionable. And you are an expert at that. And so thank you for taking your gifts and talents and turning them into stuff that people can actually use, as opposed to some academic idea that people like to sound smart about. You're not just intelligent, but you're intelligent with application that's accessible to the normal population. And that's rare today. So thank you for that.
Of course.
Now, where can we go learn more about you, and how can we book you, and how can we read your books, and how can we jump into the Win Monday movement?
I love it. Everything and anything is at paulepsteinspeaks.com. So whether speaking or books, that is the catch all, paulepsteinspeaks.com. And also, if you're ready to win Monday, let me make this very simple for you. winmonday.win. I will repeat that. winmonday.win. Go there, name, email. I will be in your inbox with one new way every single Monday that you can win that day to have momentum to win the week. And the next Monday, it'll be a new idea. So it's a gift that keeps on giving. So paulepsteinspeaks.com for speaking and books and all that good stuff. And for Win Monday, go to winmonday.win.
That is excellent. Well, thank you so much for being. I knew this was going to be a fire show, and you did not disappoint. And I'd love to have you back on maybe later on. Let's get an update from you.
Love to.
With people like you making the kind of impact you're making, you're going to have 25 more stories in a week. So I'll have you back on down the road, and let's celebrate some of those wins that you're getting on the trail. I'd love to learn more about the updates as you go along, if that's okay.
Of course, man. This was an honor and a pleasure. So just really grateful, and yes to the 2.0.
You got it. Enjoy the rest of your weekend and win Monday together.
Let's go.